I found out about Marissa Caldwell's death on a gray Tuesday afternoon while reviewing blueprints I could no longer see clearly. The call came from Ethan Caldwell, but it wasn't really him speaking at first. It was breath. Silence. Then three words that rearranged the room around me: "She's gone, Julian." For a moment, I thought he meant she had left him. Walked out. Taken a suitcase and whatever quiet resentments people hide inside marriages. But then his voice fractured in a way I had never heard in the 15 years I'd known him, and I understood. Marissa was dead. That I don't remember what I said. Something automatic. "I'm coming over. Stay where you are. I'm here." The right phrases, spoken by someone whose first, shameful thought had not been about loss, but about Ethan. That is the truth I have to live with. Ethan and I met in college, assigned as roommates in a dorm that smelled like old carpet and ambition. He studied literature, I studied architecture. He filled our shared space with secondhand novels and handwritten notes taped to the walls. I filled it with careful lines and rulers, straight edges and measurements. We balanced each other. He was warmth, I was structure. Somewhere between late-night pizza and arguments about whether poetry mattered more than physics, I fell in love with him. That I didn't name it then. I told myself it was admiration. Intensity. The kind of loyalty that grows when two people survive their early 20s side by side. But there were moments that unsettled me, like the night he fell asleep on the couch with his head against my shoulder, his breathing slow and trusting. I stayed awake until dawn, terrified to move, aware that something in me had shifted permanently. He met Marissa 2 years after graduation. She was brilliant in the way quiet people are brilliant, observant, deliberate, disarming. When Ethan introduced us, I braced for resentment, but she extended her hand and smiled like she already knew I mattered to him. "You're the famous Julian," she said once at dinner. "The one who kept him sane." I almost laughed at the irony. Their marriage was steady. Not dramatic, not loud. They built a life that looked solid from the outside, a modest house, shelves lined with books, Sunday dinners. I became a frequent guest. I told myself proximity was better than absence, and I learned how to swallow longing without choking. When I arrived at Ethan's house that Tuesday, the front door was unlocked. He was sitting on the living room floor, his back against the couch, still wearing the sweater he'd probably slept in. His eyes were red but dry, as if grief had stunned even his tears into submission. "She collapsed," he said when he saw me. "Aneurysm." They said it was instant. I sat down beside him without asking permission. The air in the room felt altered, as though something essential had been removed. Her mug was still on the coffee table. A novel lay open, face down, mid-sentence. "I keep thinking she's in the kitchen," Ethan whispered. "Or upstairs. I keep listening for her." His shoulder brushed mine, and the contact sent a current through me that I despised myself for noticing. "I'm here," I said instead. The funeral came 3 days later, rain falling in a steady, indifferent rhythm. People spoke about Marissa's kindness, her intelligence, her steadiness. Ethan stood beside the casket like a man holding himself upright through sheer discipline. When it was my turn to approach him, he gripped my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. "Don't leave," he murmured. "I won't." I promised. That I meant it. In the weeks that followed, grief hollowed him out. He stopped answering messages. Stopped going to work. I began stopping by every evening under the pretense of practical help, groceries, paperwork, anything that required movement. But mostly we sat in silence. Sometimes he talked. "I don't know who I am without her," he said one night, staring at the dark television screen. "We built everything together. Every decision was us. Now it's just me." There was something childlike in the way he said it, as if he'd been left in a crowded place without instructions. "You're still Ethan," I replied carefully. He shook his head. "Am I? Or was I just her husband?" The question lingered between us, heavier than either of us expected. A month after the funeral, he admitted something else. "I keep replaying conversations," he said quietly. "Things she asked me. About whether I was happy. Whether I felt fulfilled." He hesitated. "I thought she meant my job. But sometimes I wonder if she saw something I didn't. I forced my voice to remain neutral. Like what? He looked at me then, really looked at me, as though searching for a reflection. Like maybe I was living the version of my life that made sense, not the one that felt honest. My pulse quickened. I said nothing. Silence, I had learned, was safer than hope. That night stretched long. The house felt cavernous, echoing with absence. Ethan stood abruptly and walked to the window, rain tracing thin lines down the glass. I can't stay here, he said. Every room feels like a museum. The words formed in my mind before I could measure them. I should have calculated the consequences, weighed the morality, considered whether grief distorts desire. Instead, I spoke from a place I had kept buried for years. Move in with me, I said. That he turned slowly. Just until you figure things out, I added, the practicality of the offer masking the tremor beneath it. You don't have to decide anything about the future. You don't have to be alone. The space between us tightened. Ethan's expression shifted, not shock, not relief, but recognition. As if he understood that the invitation carried more than spare room logistics. As if he'd always known there was something unspoken threaded through our friendship. Julian, he said carefully, if I say yes, everything changes. I didn't pretend not to understand him. I know. Because moving in wouldn't just be about proximity. It would blur lines we had respected for over a decade. It would force us to confront questions Marissa had once gently posed. It would expose whether what existed between us was grief seeking comfort, or truth finally demanding space. That he stepped closer, close enough that I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. I don't want to make decisions because I'm broken, he admitted. Then don't, I said. Make them because you're ready. The honesty of that statement startled even me. He exhaled slowly, as if standing at the edge of something vast. I can't answer tonight, he said. That's fair. But when I turned to leave, his hand caught my wrist, not urgently, not desperately, just enough to stop me. Don't disappear, he said. I won't. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and reflective. As I walked to my car, I understood that the offer had already shifted the ground beneath us. Whether he moved in or not, whether we crossed a line or retreated from it, something had awakened. For 15 years, I had hidden behind loyalty. Now loyalty and longing were colliding, and if Ethan said yes, there would be no more pretending that what bound us was simple friendship. Ethan called me the next morning. I'll do it, he said, his voice steadier than I expected. I'll move in. But I need this to be uncomplicated. The word lingered between us, fragile and unrealistic. It will be, I answered, knowing even as I spoke that nothing about us had ever been uncomplicated. He moved into my apartment that weekend with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box of books he couldn't leave behind. Watching him set them down in my living room felt like watching a line redraw itself across the map of my life. This was temporary, I reminded myself. Support. Stability. A friend helping a friend. Still, when I showed him the spare bedroom, I felt the weight of the hallway between us. The first few days passed in careful politeness. We navigated shared space like diplomats from cautious countries. I left early for work and returned with groceries. He made coffee before I woke, as if repaying a debt that hadn't been named. We spoke about small things, the weather, his school, a book he was rereading, but beneath every exchange ran a quieter current. One evening, I found him standing in my kitchen, staring at nothing. You okay? I asked. I keep expecting to feel worse, Ethan admitted. Like grief should be louder. He ran a hand through his hair. Instead, sometimes I just feel untethered. Untethered isn't wrong, I said. It's just unfamiliar. He studied me as though I'd offered more than a casual observation. You're very good at staying steady, he said. Have you always been? The question unsettled me because it was almost perceptive. No, I replied. I just learned how. He nodded slowly, as if filing that away. Living together began to dissolve formality. We fell into rhythms. Sunday mornings meant shared silence and separate books on the couch. Weeknights meant cooking side by side, our movements occasionally colliding in the narrow kitchen space. Each accidental brush of hands felt amplified, but neither of us acknowledged it. One night, a storm rolled through the city and knocked out the power. The apartment fell into darkness, lit only by the distant flicker of lightning beyond the windows. Ethan and I sat on the floor of the living room, backs against the couch, the air thick with rain and unfinished thoughts. Marissa used to love storms, he said quietly. She said they made the world feel honest. I swallowed. Honest how? Like nothing could pretend. He paused. She asked me once if I'd ever felt like I was performing my life instead of living it. My chest tightened. What did you tell her? That I was happy. He let out a humorless breath. I wasn't lying. I just don't know if it was the whole truth. Lightning illuminated his face for a second, sharp and vulnerable. Julian, he continued, his voice low, did you ever feel like there was something about me I didn't see? The room seemed to shrink. Yes, I said, because lying now would have been an insult to everything unfolding between us. But it wasn't my place to name it. His gaze held mine in the dark. Maybe I needed someone to. The air between us felt charged, not with recklessness, but with recognition. For years, we had circled this edge without stepping over it. Now grief had stripped away the distractions that kept us polite. I don't want to rewrite my marriage as something false, Ethan said. Marissa mattered. She still does. I know, I answered. This isn't about erasing her. Then what is it about? The question demanded precision. It's about not erasing yourself, I said carefully. Or me. Silence followed, but it was no longer evasive. It was contemplative. A few days later, Ethan visited the cemetery alone. When he returned, his composure was thinner. I felt like I was confessing, he said, standing near the doorway as if unsure whether he belonged inside. Like I owed her an explanation for even being here with you. You don't owe anyone grief in a specific shape, I replied. That he shook his head. It's not just grief. His voice sharpened slightly. Did you always want this, Julian? There it was, the accusation we had both been avoiding. Yes, I said, because honesty had become the only sustainable option. But I never wanted it at the cost of her life. I never wished for that. He studied my face, searching for evidence of cruelty. Whatever he found seemed to steady him. I don't think you did, he admitted. That almost makes it harder. Why? Because it means this isn't opportunistic. It means it's real. The word settled heavily. He moved further into the room, closing the physical distance between us. Not touching, just near enough that the space felt intentional. I've been questioning parts of myself for years, Ethan said. Not because I was unhappy with Marissa. But because there were moments, small ones, when I felt something I couldn't categorize. He looked at me directly. Moments with you. I let the truth exist without embellishment. I know. I was afraid of what that meant, he continued. Afraid it would invalidate everything else. It doesn't, I said firmly. People are more complicated than the boxes we put them in. He exhaled, tension easing slightly. I don't want to make you a replacement, he said. Or a rebound. That would be unfair. I wouldn't accept that, I replied. That seemed to matter to him. The days that followed were quieter but clearer. We stopped pretending that the undercurrent didn't exist. We spoke about it in measured language, like architects discussing a fragile structure. What would it look like? What would it cost? Who would it hurt? One evening, as we washed dishes together, Ethan turned off the faucet and faced me fully. I can't erase her, he said. And I don't want to. You shouldn't. But I can't erase this either. His voice was steady now, grounded in decision rather than confusion. I don't know what it becomes. I don't know how people will understand it. But I know I don't want to keep living half-aware. The honesty in his tone dismantled the last of my restraint. We don't have to define it tonight, I said. We just have to stop hiding from it. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him without contact. The space between us held history, grief, loyalty, and something newly forming. For the first time, Ethan said quietly, I feel like I'm choosing something instead of inheriting it. I nodded, understanding the magnitude of that admission. This wasn't about loneliness. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about recognition, of identity, of connection, of years spent orbiting a truth neither of us had dared to articulate, that he didn't kiss me. I didn't reach for him. The restraint was deliberate, almost reverent. What we were building required patience, not impulse, but when he finally spoke again, his voice carried certainty. I want to see where this goes, Ethan said. Slowly. Honestly. Without pretending it's something else. Relief and fear intertwined in my chest. Then we start there, I replied. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the quiet revolution inside my apartment. Nothing dramatic had happened, no declarations shouted into the night, no lines dramatically crossed. And yet everything had shifted. That we were no longer circling possibility. We were acknowledging it. As Ethan turned off the kitchen light and walked down the hallway toward his room, he paused and glanced back at me, a faint, thoughtful expression on his face. It wasn't certainty about the future. It was certainty about the choice to stop running from it, and for now, that was enough to begin.